Hi, everyone, and welcome to the dotConnect24 session titled Navigating Multi-Channel Complexity, the Battle for Attention. This session is probably most interesting to anybody working in marketing or with any kind of digital content in any capacity. We will talk through multi-channel strategy complexity, interesting anecdotes. We'll talk through breaking through the noise and the role that AI plays in all of this. My name is Ina Bosenko. I'm VP of Marketing here at .cms and hosting dotConnect. And with me, I have a very special guest, one of the most innovative, talented marketing leaders I've had the pleasure to work with in my career, Jess.
That's a fantastic introduction. I might just record that and cut it out for future things. Hi, everyone. I'm Jess Gonzalez. I've spent my career working in marketing, either working in-house at fast growth B2B SaaS companies where the challenge was, how do we do more with less? We have limited budget, limited team. How can we really take ownership of a massive pipeline number and revenue number to drive results without having to add, 2 times as many headcount or buy a ton of expensive tools? The other half of my career has been spent working at MarTech vendors like Metadata, Social Flow, Movable Ink, where I work with clients to be more successful using modern marketing practices, systems. I've been working in AI since before it was a hot thing. Before ChatGPT came to be, I was using LLM. So my focus is really on bringing in operations, process, and technology to help bring efficiency so that your human marketers can spend time doing the stuff that only they can do. And I talk about it a lot.
So, love it. So before we dive into any of the topics, let's start with a quick rapid fire round. So these are the questions that I'm looking for 1 to 3 word answers, just your hot take on it so that we can dive deeper into the topic. So what's the biggest challenge in capturing consumer attention today?
There's so many. Oh, shoot, that's not a one-word sentence. Let me take that back. TikTok. TikTokification.
Okay. And what's the most valuable tool for scaling content across channels?
The most valuable tool for scaling content the most is a system.
Okay. And what one word best describes the future of marketing with AI?
I'm going to give a hyphenated word, ripe with opportunity.
Ooh, okay. So let's dive into the challenges that marketers are facing today in this world of AI in content production and scaling.
If we look at 100 years ago, even 20 years ago, to be honest, in some regards, there were such fewer channels of being able to engage and conversate with your consumer. And we would often see, if you think back to, which none of us were alive for, but if you think back to the Sears and Roebuck catalog of like the late 1800s, that a lot of our ancestors would have ordered their refrigerator or maybe in their house from, that was Sears' only method of communication. They knew we put out this catalog, people see it, they buy it. That's all we have to focus on. As marketing evolved, it became the catalog and then maybe a brochure, which is really a miniature catalog in a smaller form. And then when commercials started to come on TV, it would still align very heavily with the print media of the time. So you move from one channel to 2 channel to now when we look at it, there's so many avenues to connect with your target audience where they're active online, especially the younger generations where websites aren't even a thing sometimes, or they're never going to go to your website, which still boggles my mind. There's all these different avenues. And to really be successful on them, you can't just take the same content and share it on each platform in the same way like people did in the late 90s, early 2000s. When social media came up, we started to see I would say the first time in a really obvious way that the message you put on Facebook to be most successful isn't the message you put on Facebook versus Instagram. And now, especially with AI, I feel like that's just a million times folded. Rough rounding up on that stat there. But it's so much more complex because there's so many more channels and there's so much more to test on each channel with how to really communicate. And you have so many different consumers that are really exhibiting different buying habits where it used to be, maybe like 2 or 3 different segments within one actual segment based on age. But now you might be hitting 13 to 15-year-olds who engage totally different, use a totally different language than 55 to 60 to 55 plus even. They're booming on a lot of platforms where the younger demographic is moving away, but they're going to more closed communities. So the complexity is just massive. And with that complexity, also collecting data so you know what works and what doesn't work has gotten a lot more challenging.
So on that note, I think I'm curious your take on, I mean, you're saying sometimes you're hitting 13, 15-year-olds, sometimes your buyer can be completely different and live on completely different channels. So how can you scale personalization and content creation that's so critical? You have to deliver the right message in the right way, on the right channel, in the right format. So what is your take on how personalization can be scaled? And also piggybacking on that, how do you see AI? How do you see leveraging AI to
Yeah.
scale that personalization in an authentic way?
Yeah.
Build trust.
Personalization is always going to be beneficial to what you're doing. I would say in the last 20 years, I've seen maybe one or two campaigns where personalization was seen as creepy. Technically, when talking to either super technical audiences where they know that it's happening and they feel uncomfortable with the fact that you know their first name or where they work, or sometimes they're just audiences that don't respond to it, but it doesn't deter at all. Typically, personalization will always help your campaign. AI is making personalization a lot more easy to do at scale because you used to have to go through and, like, let's say you're using smart pages on HubSpot. So you have a landing page and you have a ton of variables in there. You would still have to make that spreadsheet saying which variables are which and which UTM parameter correlates to which module being delivered. And now with AI, you can say what you want to do and it'll make that like 10,000 row spreadsheet for you. So you don't have to spend the time manually doing it. Where I think there's a chance for a competitive edge is if you know how to manually do it, you're thinking about it differently than someone who's only ever done it with AI. So it doesn't necessarily mean that AI is going to let someone who's never done personalization ramp up and outperform your campaigns if you are really have been in personalization for quite a while. On the flip side, if you've never done personalization, AI can make it easier for you to get into it. But as a lot of things in marketing, getting good isn't that hard, but getting great is really hard. So you can get to good faster with AI, but great still takes the fundamentals to get there. Where I think personalization should go at scale is, and what I would say to anyone who's listening to this saying, hey, I really think we should be taking advantage of this because right now we don't personalize, especially if you don't have an email nurture. And I know someone listening to this doesn't have an email nurture up because I see it every single week where someone wants to launch some super complex ABM campaign and then they don't have a nurture and they don't have lead routing and everything in place. So if you're listening to this, pick a starting point. And if you don't have your nurture, make your nurture part of it because that is the number one spot to personalize based on content someone's engaging in, not just first name personalization. So pick your starting point because there's so many different channels. Figure out how you can best engage on that channel, that platform, and then start tying it into things adjacent. So let's say that you are a B2B brand. LinkedIn is probably a no-brainer for you. Instagram actually performs really well for B2B these days. Instagram has a bunch of more robust targeting, I would say. You can get a lower cost per performance. It's a lower bar to entry where you can run on Instagram for $10, $15 a day and get some results. On LinkedIn, you really need $100+ a day. So if you are B2B, LinkedIn's a no-brainer, but let's talk Instagram. You get someone on Instagram, you're running your campaign, you're targeting, you're segmenting by industry, title, gender, age, all of that. And you're starting to see people come to your website, come to download an asset, let's say, and they're starting to actually engage. Well, you can take that landing page that asset is on, and you could update so that it adjusts based on the industry they're in. Now, you can do that if you have HubSpot, Muni, a bunch of different tools, but even without those, you could actually just test a totally different URL you send them to. You can still A/B test on the platform and start with things that are easy that I would say are a little bit more removed from personal so you can test the water. So you could start with industry where, the top ways hotel companies, top ways hotels increase retention. Top ways manufacturing increases retention. Top ways hospitality. So you can start personalizing on the industry level and then move closer to that human. Now, in this example, let's say you've got Instagram down, it's working really well. Your next step is let's look at what happens after they come in. Are they going into a nurture that's really specific to them? Because if you can get that nurture to convert, increase the conversion rate on it, you're probably going to get more qualified leads that are going to your sellers. We're going to be able to close them more easily. So once you have your mechanism to bring them in, how you're getting them to your sellers, is that optimized? Okay, now what can we do? Well, now what if we go and retarget, and we retarget with even more personalized content? So you can really build, and when I mentioned systems in the beginning with the one-word question, you can really build a system where when someone comes in, it's almost like the little Planko game. They're kind of bopping around based on where they need to be. And then at each of those touch points, you can find ways to make it feel like that content and that engagement is exactly what they're looking for. I mean, I do it all the time when I'm shopping and I'll see something and be like, I was just thinking I needed that. And here it appears in front of me at a store. It's meant to be. Might as well go buy it. You're creating some of those moments where it just feels like it's meant to be by leveraging personalization, which again, does not have to be overly complicated. You can even do just 2 separate landing pages based on desktop or mobile, because those are different experiences too.
Hmm. So then also adding on to that, I guess the main topic of the session, the managing multi-channel, cross-channel complexity. As you build out these workflows for your different personas and for your different buyers across different channels, do you have any anecdotes on how do you manage that complexity? Because it can get very disjointed, very complicated, really quick, and you can lose sight, and just it can become a complete just explosion of content that you're just putting out there. So yeah, what is your take on managing that complexity?
So there's a couple spots. I'm going to start at the higher level view down on it. I used to work for an A/B and multivariate testing platform where we would get large e-commerce companies that would come in and they would say, my goal is to increase conversion on the page for holiday gifts because it's November's coming up, whatever. And then they would start testing different CTA colors. Is that really going to move the needle? It can be really easy to get lost in testing things that might just feel like easy things to test or feel like no-brainers because one of your VPs or your CEO read a blog post about how Google tested 1,100 different shades of blue to find the most converting blue. You're not Google. You don't have Google traffic because that test took them a week because they have so much traffic. So think about really what are things that can move the needle for you. It's probably revenue. And if it's not revenue, maybe your goal is really just website traffic converting. You can still tie it back to revenue down the road, but think about those big goals and what would actually move the needle. Don't just test little things and try and personalize in little ways that aren't going to really be impactful. Go big with it because you're also then going to get more data to show the personalization versus non-personalization. You'll have more data if the differences are larger and you have a larger spread. It can be really easy, though, to not see the forest for the trees, I think is the saying, and to kind of get stuck in that. So make sure that you are thinking high level. Why are we personalizing? What are we trying to do? What are we actually trying to drive? Logistically, this can be an absolute nightmare, especially when you start building retargeting funnels on top of it and wanting to segment into different nurtures, email nurtures based on that retargeting and this and that. I'm always a fan of starting on pen and paper or a Miro board or Lucidchart and just map it out. Map out what your user flow is and then go validate it. Because I have seen a lot of people who said, this is my user flow. And then we go and we pull up Google Analytics and we do like a reverse funnel of how they're getting to that conversion point. And we go, oh, that's not what they're doing. They're actually going pricing page, pricing page, other product page, pricing page, other product page. Wow, what a great insight. So validate whatever you think the flow is, and then start identifying those spots where if we can double conversion here, or we can double our engagement rate or whatever it is, if we can double it, that it will change the outcome drastically. And then start mapping it on top of it. It's really crucial when you go through and build robust personalization playbooks or frameworks, whatever you want to call it, that you have documentation, because I'm guaranteeing you in 6 months, you will not remember what CR1 is versus CR5. So make sure you document and lay it out really well. So when you go through and look, you can actually understand what you did and you can share it with others in a way that they can understand. This is a total side tip But as a marketer, if you can't explain your program in a page or a paragraph, it's going to hinder your ability to get buy-in long term and to be able to share your success and results. So always start documentation on the tactical side, making sure it's there. And there's a ton of tools you can use to help orchestrate. So if you're using a CRM, if you're using HubSpot, Marketo, there's a lot you can do in there for orchestration. 6sense has amazing tools. And then I'm a huge fan of Rollworks on the display advertising side, because they also have tools to help orchestrate all of that being tied together. So then you get your tools in there to help kind of automate it. If you're on more the hands-on side, the DIY side, you can also do all of this between Airtable, Retool, and Zapier. So there's also ways to kind of DIY it if you want to get your hands dirty, or if you have literally zero budget. But I would start documentation, move to how you can automate some of the stuff that's working, and keep it going, and make sure that you're always thinking about what is that high level target, because you're not personalizing just to personalize, right? You're personalizing and you're testing these variables because you want to drive some outcome.
On that note, here at .cms, we view content production as like a team effort. So everything from ideation to creation to production to publishing to deployment to distribution, it's a very cross-functional effort, whether it's a smaller company or it's a mid-market company. But when it gets really complicated is when the company gets bigger and there's a multi-brand strategy.
Oh, yeah.
You still have to maintain that consistency, and it's still a team effort across the board. So do you have any stories or any tips in this challenge of maintaining that cross-channel, multi-channel complexity of content production when it's already a team effort and then it's a multi-team effort? So just scaling that, what are your thoughts?
I actually love AI as a use case for this. So something that we will often do with clients in our current case, and what I used to do back in the day when I was running marketing, is take what you produce, put it into Claude or ChatGPT, and ask it who it's written for. Ask it what ICP it thinks it's written for, or pull in some of your, maybe one of your brand focuses is being really empowering to others. Ask AI if the content sounds like that, or put in like 4 or 5 different blog posts and ask AI if it sounds like they're all from the same company. Because it can be really easy, especially when you have different writers. You have people who maybe love the Oxford comma and hate the Oxford comma. You have people that like to capitalize differently. It can be really easy when you're at scale to have a ton of content that looks like it's not connected at all. So AI is a great use case to help give you that feedback to pull it together. Back in the day, early 2010s, I helped launch hundreds of Facebook pages for timing. Now, this was the early, I'll call it earlier days of Facebook, where brands were starting to realize if we can get a big Facebook following, we can leverage that. Not just leverage it off Facebook, but a lot of times they're actually even selling advertising space and promotion and content syndication. So Time, Condé, Bloomberg, Economist, Al Jazeera help set up all these massive volumes of Facebook and online properties for them, which was a ton of fun, but also some really interesting challenges, because you would end up having a bunch of pages that didn't feel connected. So then when you would share content between them, it would feel like, why is this happening? Where at least if it feels like it's the same family, it feels like it's the same brand, it feels like not as unexpected. It doesn't create that cognitive dissonance if you're on Brides magazine and then you see another Condé property kind of slide in. So going back to systems, which everything in life I feel like kind of boils down to, making sure that you have everything documented so people understand what are our brand values, what are our brand guidelines, how do we talk, what words do we use, what language, do we use emojis or not, and then what are the differences between the brands? Because you don't want everything to sound identical. Then you might as well have just cloned every page and made like Nikocado 1, Nikocado 2, Nikocado 3. You're different for a reason. So figure out what those differentiations are there too between them, and then how can the brands talk and interact with each other? Like Southern Living does a lot of, I remember Southern Living did a lot of features of content from other pages, but they would always do it in a way of like, if you have a dinner party, here's some XYZ to think about. It's like, well, that feels totally endemic to Southern Living because they share a lot of food and recipes and such. So think about how they go together. And then ultimately you need a lot of communication, and you need someone to really help own that interconnectivity and the relationship between all the people who own those individual brands.
Mm-hmm. So from the way you describe things, I think I know your answer, but this is a hot take question as well that everyone I ask, I get a different take. Some people are horrified, some people are excited. Do you think in the long term, AI can replace humans, or do you think it's going to continue to serve this supportive, helpful like tool for us, and the humans are still essential in content creation, scaling, production, personalization? What is your take?
So I would say I'm a realist. AI is going to replace humans the same way that steam power replaced horses, the same way that the car replaced the horse and the buggy. It's here. And being a Luddite and fighting it is going to be a Sisyphusian task. Like, you're not going to get anywhere with it. It's here. What I will say is AI will not replace your job. The person who is going to replace you is someone that costs half as much to employ and understands how to use AI to produce 20 times as much output than you are. That's what it really is. I hear a lot of people say they're scared of AI and they think it's going to replace them, and so they don't want to embrace it. They don't want to learn about it because they see it as this bad thing. The reality is it's here. It's not going away. We're still seeing layoffs especially on the tech sector. We are still seeing more and more companies that aren't hiring and having the same headcount volume that they had pre-pandemic. It's here. Like, AI is not going away. So you have two choices. You fight it, and maybe you can carve out a niche where you do something super bespoke, and so you charge a ton of money for it. I think we're going to see that market actually expand, where people are going to be more and more willing to pay a premium for something that doesn't have AI involved at all, because they value not having AI involved. The same thing where we see in the United States, where products that are built in the US are usually more expensive, but there is a whole group of people that are happy to pay more because it aligns with their values, it aligns with what they're looking at. So you can try and carve out that bespoke niche. I'm telling you, it's gonna be a lot harder with it. And even if you're doing that, why would you not want to use a tool that's going to help you spend less time doing the stuff that you hate? Like, the stuff that AI is really, really good at is mundane tasks. Like, I will regularly throw numbered lists into ChatGPT and tell it to give it to me as a CSV, like a comma separated paragraph, so I can copy and paste it into somewhere. Before that, I would put that list in Excel. I would use some functions to strip off the numbers, and then I would concate everything, and it would take me like 15 minutes. It's not the end of the world, but I'm okay if AI takes that part of my job. Like, I'm okay with that. So AI, let AI take the shit you don't want to do.
I
Okay?
love.
Let them take it. Where I think there's a big concern and a gap, what I see is for those who are entering the workplace in the next few years, there is going to be a big gap in mentorship internally and in development, because a lot of companies, they're saying, hey, with AI, we're more efficient. And what the smart companies are doing is they're saying, how do we get our people who've been here a long time and our senior people, how do we get them being in roles where they can contribute more strategically? But the unfortunate reality is a lot of companies are saying, awesome, I can take my $180,000 a year senior director, and now I just need a manager for $90,000 that I'm going to spend $50 a month on AI tools, and I'm going to get the same output. But it's the same volume. It's not always the same strategic. And I say that because I actually used to work in process engineering, industrial engineering, and I was heavily involved with companies that were offshoring. And typically the good ones would say, we now have 20% of our workforce that doesn't actually have to work because we can hit our same production value or our production volume, and we don't really need more. So how do we take them and let's start moving them to the engineering team? Let's start moving them in the field so they could help with people who maybe need to troubleshoot because they built it. They know how to fix it in the field. The good companies reinvested in the people that help build their company and put them in roles where they're more strategic and where they can still add a ton of value, which also makes them feel good because they have career growth. The reality is not everyone's a good company, and not all companies are going to do that. So I think where it's going to create a really interesting dynamic in the next 5, 10 years is we're going to have a generation of marketers who are really, really savvy with AI, who don't necessarily know the fundamentals of marketing or the stuff that you only really run into when you've ran 70 plus direct mailing campaigns. Like when you've done enough of something, you're going to end up finding all the little issues with it. But I think there's going to be a lot of lack of mentorship on the marketing fundamental side and an over focus on AI. So if you can still, like, if you're listening to this and you're newer into your career, reach out to people on LinkedIn that have the job titles that you want to have and ask them if they'll talk to you. Because typically senior people are very flattered when people ask them to mentor them, ask for their advice, and you need to have that mentorship and guidance to really build as a marketer while you're building your technical chops. And yeah, it's gonna be interesting. So that's where I see more of a concern. And if you're fighting AI, go bespoke or just embrace it because it's here.
For sure. It's definitely an irreplaceable in our processes, especially for smaller marketing teams. If we want to launch that nurture on top of a program, on top of retargeting, have this personalized content journey that we take our buyers on, AI is irreplaceable in our tech stack, in our box.
Well, on the website, if you look at programmatic SEO, so 5, 10 years ago, I would build programmatic SEO pages and it would be an Excel spreadsheet that would get pushed into a WordPress plugin that let you build pages with Excel, or it would get pushed into like HubSpot DB. But it was a lot. It was weeks of time to set up. And now with AI, we have a couple clients where we're putting 500-600 pages out a week for them that are all designed to be optimized for very specific long tail keywords that we've helped use AI to identify and surface that are low competition and high potential volume. That project a decade ago, for us to put 500 pages out, it would be a 6 to 8 month project. And now you can do it in a day.
So what are your must-have tools? You said a system. So what is your must-have in the system?
I have ones that I'm biased towards, which I will obviously mention. But at the base, you need a CRM. I'm a huge fan of HubSpot. They bring a lot to the table. The price point is low. I actually use HubSpot as a personal CRM. It's like $20 a month. So I can keep track of everyone that I'm connected to. If there's people that I haven't caught up with in a couple months, it'll remind me to go catch up with them. So I'm a huge fan of HubSpot. If you want to build it yourself for whatever reason, because again, it's like $20 a month for starter. If you want to build it yourself, Airtable lets you do a lot of automation within it. You can link tables. I've done similar in ClickUp also, and not quite as much automation in Notion, but Notion could pull it together for you. But you need some CRM level to hold all your data, to do some of your automation work. And then I always want to layer on top of that Zapier, Retool, Make.com, Tray.io, one of those tools where you can integrate different platforms that typically don't talk to each other, or there's still value with using Zapier on tools that have integrations, because oftentimes with Zapier, you can integrate things that you can't do natively with the platform. So your CRM, your automation, your additional automation layer, and then think about where your audience is. There's a good chance, unless you're selling to very specific segment of younger kids, you need a website. So build your website, that's a huge chunk of it too. It's on the website layer. And then if you're doing email marketing, HubSpot Marketo can do that for you. If you're not using one of those two, and maybe you're using Airtable, you can actually send emails from Airtable. You can do it for transactional stuff. You can also add in something like Sendinblue. MailChimp is growing in their sophistication with what they have for workflows. I don't care if anyone from MailChimp hates me for saying this. They're not up to speed, and their pricing is starting to be around what HubSpot is for it. So I haven't had a good experience with that. I don't recommend it. There's not a reason to use them. I'll say it.
From MailChimp, there's some product feedback for you guys.
Yeah. Sendinblue is another great one. Like, there's a ton of options out there. And then if you're working with sales automation or outbounding automation, Brevo is my favorite tool for that. Brevo, Mailshake, super competitive with those. Data enrichment, I tend to go with Apollo over Clay, though Clay is also a really good one. If you're looking for B2B enrichment, Primer is one of the best options out there. So definitely highly recommend Primer also. On the advertising orchestration front, metadata is always a strong contender. I will acknowledge I used to work there, so I am biased. Rollworks, I think, is still one of my favorite ones when it comes to if you're trying to run programmatic or social advertising or anything advertising first. Rollworks is really purpose-built for that. Your tools like Demand-Based and 6sense are great for account discovery, surfacing insights for your sellers. They, in my opinion, really took advertising as a secondary tool to it. So you're not going to get as much of an advertising focus on there, but they have some really great features coming out, especially 6sense on the AI front. And Warmly really plays with all of those. It can kind of sit on top of everything. So Warmly will help de-anonymize your site traffic. It has a chatbot that's AI driven in it. So it's kind of cool because it'll go and look at the person and it'll tailor that first message to be really catered towards them. So we had it on our agency site for a little while, testing it out, just playing around. And every time I would go, it'd say like, hey, go Badgers, because I went to Wisconsin and I live in Wisconsin and that's on my LinkedIn. And so it tries to create a more personal experience with its outreach to pull it in. And then it does a bunch of scoring and stuff. I named a ton of tools. That's usually who I go for. You also have like qualified user gems, which can have a good use case if you're on the B2B side. Not always necessary to say when first starting out, but are also great tools to pull in. There's probably a few. Oh, actually, let me just add two more. SmithOS and AirOps. These are tools that I've recently started using more. I think agentic AI is the future. And what agentic AI means is you're building little agents. So if you think about building your marketing team, you're building an agent whose job is, let's talk about the SEO front. Their job is just doing SEO keyword research. And then they take all that research and then they pass it to another agent whose entire existence, it's like the Meeseeks from wow, Rick and Morty, brain space on that. It's like, yeah, the Mr. Meeseeks, where their whole job is to do one specific thing. And so you can build your team and say, here's my keyword research person. Here's my agent that is going to take that keyword research and is going to give me a top 3 to focus on. And then here's my agent that's going to go through and it's going to write a content brief. And then it's going to pass it to the agent that's going to go through and write the outline for it. And then it'll pass it to the agent that's going to look at the outline and give it feedback. And then it'll go to the agent that does it. So you end up having, 10, 15, 100 plus agents on your little team to help you produce everything instead of trying to get one agent or like ChatGPT interface to do all of it for you. It's the same thing with humans. You're trying to hire a marketer that is great at event marketing and at ABM and can build you a website and can do all this other stuff. Like, you're not going to find them. They're rare. They're unicorns. So instead of trying to find one AI to do everything, it's pulling in a ton of AI to do individual specific functions and then have it all orchestrated together in one platform. So SmithOS, SMYTHOS, and AirOps are my two favorite ones for that.
And we can wrap up the session with a question that all of us marketers live and breathe: data. So what are your top KPIs for measuring content success that you can say this piece of content is absolutely crushing it? What are you going to look at to be able to determine that?
Yeah. So I like to map everything back to revenue. But I will say when it comes to revenue from content, that path is pretty long. And once a meeting happens, so what I'll typically do is I'll look at, is this content, number one, sourcing net new contacts in the accounts we want to be in? If you're on the e-commerce side, is it driving to people adding items to their cart? Now, your cart actually hitting checkout, that conversion has other things that can also influence it. So first step, are you getting them into the cart or adding them to the cart? Are you getting them to add more items to the cart? Are you getting those net new contacts in? If you're using a tool like Warmly, Demand-Based, 6sense, are you also just seeing more engagement in targeted accounts? Maybe they haven't converted yet, but if we've learned anything over the past, 5 or 6 years on the B2B side, consumers want to spend a lot of time doing research and they want to be confident in their decision to work with you before they ever talk to your sellers. So the number of touch points that someone has pre-engagement is growing. So are you seeing engagement in those targeted accounts, even if they haven't converted yet? And then follow those conversions back. So I would start with optimizing for that first point. Once you have enough data, and like 2 sales isn't enough data. Like when you have enough data for your next step, once they convert, are they engaging? Are they coming back? Are they opening newsletter emails? Are they replying to sales cold outbounding? Are they taking strong secondary actions? Are they checking out? If you're on the e-commerce side, what is their average cart value? Is that growing? So I like to start with whatever's closest to that metric that you can actually measure, and then start moving back with the goal to ultimately measure impact on revenue. That should be the ultimate goal. I think Gartner said only like 60% of marketers have a pipeline number or a revenue number. So I know there's a ton of marketers that don't, but if you can tie into revenue, you stop being a cost center and you start becoming a revenue generating center.
And start being more strategic around what actually works. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks so much, Jess, for joining us for this session. For anybody that joined, tell them where they can find you and how they can connect with you.
Yeah, I would say the best spot is find me on LinkedIn, Jess Gonzalez. I have a picture in a Twitter shirt and sunglasses. I talk about AI. I talk about tools a lot. I have a podcast, Marketers Talking, and in 2025, we're actually going to be rolling out a ton of AI content, including talking to more marketers who are building AI for marketers specifically. So, and honestly, if you have any questions about tools, want my feedback on anything, message me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty responsive and I'm always happy to chat about this stuff.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jess. And thank you for joining. Stick around for more sessions later in the day.